Good morning, good afternoon. Happy New Year, everyone. A greeting a bit overdue, but still relevant since it is the first webinar of WeConnect's Academy webinar series of the year. So, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining. My name is Andrea, and today I am very happy to introduce Cinzia Ruberto. She is the Managing Director of Encore Travel, a Canadian based certified women owned company founded over 3 decades ago, and in the years since has established itself as one of the most loved corporate travel partners, thanks to a boutique style service with global reach and a data driven approach. Cinzia leverages considerable experience earned at Flighthub and Booking.com, as well as Encore, where she mastered the management of vendor agreements, leading the strategic partnerships team to excel. Thus, today she brings us this webinar in which she will try to demystify the concept of innovation and its applicability to companies of all sizes and maturity. I'll let Cinzia introduce herself, but I would like to remind all the attendees that you're in listen only mode. That means that if you have any questions or trouble, please write them down in the chat or Q&A boxes. I'll make sure to read them out loud at the end of the webinar, and I encourage everyone to do as many questions as possible. Thank you, Cinzia, for being here with us today. Over to you. You may start your webinar.
Fantastic. Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Andrea, for the warm welcome and the honor of being the first webinar series of the year. I'd like to start off just by thanking WeConnect International and Andrea for coordinating this webinar series and really allowing us to share our learnings and ideas with this wonderful community that we're now part of. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome to Decoding Innovation, Breaking Through the Innovation Block. Now, a little bit about me. As Andrea introduced you, my name is Cinzia Ruberto. I oversee the travel tech division of Encore Travel, which is a corporate travel management company based in Montreal, Canada. I absolutely love to travel. I've loved to travel since I was a little kid, so much so that I've so far visited 33 different countries. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to work in an industry that I love, having worked at some of popular websites such as Booking.com, Flighthub, and Encore. Some fun facts about me: I can't live without Spotify. I think I use it every single day, multiple times a day. And then an app that I still can't seem to figure out just yet is TikTok, and maybe somebody in the audience will somehow be able to give me a crash course on that. I'm by no means an expert in innovation, if that's even a thing. I haven't written a book about it or hosted a TED Talk, although it's definitely one of my bucket list items. I'm just a regular person like you, trying to add value, make meaning, create something, and really be part of something bigger than myself. If any of this resonates with you, you might also feel what I feel sometimes, which is innovation is an overly used buzzword that can mean so many different things, and in the end sometimes causes confusion. And sometimes I kind of think of this: what is innovation, and can I buy it? You're not alone if you've ever felt this way, and hopefully by the end of today, I'll be able to decode it and help you come up with some ways to foster innovation, whether you're working at a large organization or a smaller, medium-sized one like we are at Encore Travel. So whenever I'm searching for the meaning of something, I always start with the definition of it. So let's start at the source. What is innovation? It can refer to something new or to a change made to an existing product, idea, or field. So for example, a new flexible cell phone, well, that would be an innovation from the original cell phone. Or the innovative portable toaster knife, or the aqua treadmill, if any of you have ever seen or used that. These are all innovations that stem from something that was invented from the first time, and they're improvements on something. Now, often when we think of how these innovations came to be, how they were created, it's funny because we think of it as a two-step process. The first step being we think. We're supposed to be thinking out into space, wait a little while for something to happen, and then all of a sudden, boom, the eureka moment is supposed to happen. This great idea, innovation that will disrupt the markets and society as a whole is supposed to come to you. I mean, the truth is, this rarely ever happens. Innovations tend to be incremental over time, little tweaks that are being made here and there. And then in the end, the end result is something truly innovative that changes the way we do things, that changes our day to day. Now, if we think of what innovation looks like, it has many different shapes and forms, right? If you look at Uber Eats, well, that's an innovation that allows you to order McDonald's at any time of the day and anywhere you like. Or Alexa, who can simultaneously turn on your lights and start your coffee machine at the same time, helping you time manage. Might look like a drone, or it's a Tesla, or it can also be a plant-based meat alternative like Beyond Meat, which we've all seen in the media. These are obviously examples of disruptive innovations, ones that we've all heard about, ones that are all over the media, but not all innovations end up in the media. Some are simple innovations that just made our lives better, and we never even paid attention to them or might have registered them as an innovation. So what are some of those examples? Well, I've got a couple here. The beer fridge pack, although simple, was quite an innovation. You no longer had to take the cans out of the packaging. Or the cup holder, again, super simple, but it really changed the way we would do things in the car. Or a zipper on a jacket, or scented bath tissues. Simple things, not earth-shattering, didn't necessarily win an award or end up in the media, but it did change our lives. Now, what I've shared with you primarily are what we call product innovations. But there's actually several categories when it comes to innovation. So if you haven't identified yourself with one of these product innovations, it could be that maybe you are already innovating, but in one of the other categories. So product innovation means the introduction of new or significantly improved goods or services on the market. The other type of innovation is process innovation. This is the implementation of new or significantly improved production processes, distribution, and delivery methods or support activities for goods and services. Process innovation is actually one of the fastest growing innovation categories. In Canada, where we're based here, it represented for the year 2015 to 2017, almost 60% of the innovations of Canadian businesses. And yet these are innovations that we don't necessarily always talk about. An example of process innovation would come from the retailer Zara, with which most of us are familiar with. They were able to automate their design processes in an innovative way, which gave them the ability to copy a runway look within 20 days of first seeing it. Whereas in the past, this was a process that could have taken months, and that some retailers still take months. Now, another kind of innovation that maybe you might be doing is marketing innovation. So this is the use of new media or techniques for promotion, new methods of product placement or pricing, or changes to aesthetic design or packaging. And lastly, the other type of innovation is organizational innovation. So the introduction of new methods and business practices, workspace, workplace organization, or external relations that has not been previously used by the enterprise. So here, the open office concept. It was definitely an organizational innovation that has been adopted by several companies. Now, I've given you a little bit of high-level overview of what it means, what does innovation mean, and maybe you've got some questions that might be coming to mind. So when we try to break it down even further, it's really maybe 3 questions that might be popping up. Where does the catalyst for improvement come from? Does the degree of improvement matter? And how can continuous improvement be fostered? So if we start with where does the catalyst for improvement come from, you start by looking for a problem. And you're really the most knowledgeable person in your field. You're aware of the common tools or methods of your industry. You're familiar with the operational procedures within your organization. And I'm sure you know of a problem that needs solving. The funny thing about problems is, as a society, we're often told to think positively, not to talk about the negative, to focus on the positive. In the case of innovation, an eye for problem is really the foundation of improvement and innovation. Identifying a lack, an issue, or a missing element is the first step of innovation. So if you take a moment and think about the last team meeting you might have had, was there a problem, a pain point that would need to be solved? If you looked at, maybe you have some customer surveys, is there some feedback that is coming your way? Or conversations that you've had with clients? Is there something that they've told you that you might be able to come up with a solution for, and which in turn is an innovation? Now, does the degree of improvement really matter? Or does it have to be a disruptive innovation or a small innovation? You know, it doesn't really matter what it is. You just have to find a way to solve a problem. Whether that be introducing a new way to get more candy or the next Netflix, the degree of improvement is really insignificant. What matters is that we're improving. How can continuous improvement be fostered? Is constant innovation possible? Of course it is, right? We wouldn't be here if it wasn't. Not only is this possible, it's necessary for our survival. Think of all the great companies who try to just keep doing things the same way without innovating. At some point, they're not able to keep going forward. If you think of Blockbuster or Sears, these are companies that needed to continuously innovate and they stopped at some point. So it's definitely essential. Now, at this point, I've given you some food for thought, and maybe you'd like to get started. Out with the old and in with a new way of thinking. So let me give you a few simple things, 5 steps that you can do to move towards innovation. Now, what I'll share with you is not earth-shattering. It's really simple, basic stuff that maybe you just haven't had a chance to think about. The first one is really tell the world. Sounds basic, and yet it's the one we tend not to do. Tell your colleagues that you're open to new innovations, that you're open to new solutions to solving problems. Post it in the office kitchen. What is the issue that you have that you'd love input on? Tell people in person. Write about it in your intranet. If the people within your organization don't know that you're thinking about this, how can they possibly help to contribute? And the thing to remember here is you don't have to be the CEO or a C-level executive to foster change. apart from asking people inside your organization, go outside of your company. Tell your vendors what you're trying to do, your clients, your friends and family. Tell them about the problems in your industry or at your company. People are willing to help you if you ask for help. When we started building our platform, which we call Z, we started talking. We told people within the company that we wanted to build this platform. We spoke with our clients. We spoke with our vendors. We told people what was the problem that we were trying to solve within the corporate travel space. And we got some great ideas and feedback, which just made our platform that much stronger. Now, once you're done telling the world, next thing you got to do is shake things up a little bit. We're used to our routine, our 9 to 5, our daily tasks. But in order to really spark innovation, sometimes we need to move things around so that the ideas come to us. One thing that can be done is to bring someone new to a meeting. Whether we're talking about an internal meeting or an external meeting with a client, if you bring someone new, you might get a new perspective and a new idea and a new innovation. We actually brought our data scientist to a sales meeting with a potential client. I'll be honest, we brought him because we thought it would make us look kind of cool bringing a data scientist to a sales meeting. But turns out he came back from that meeting with lots of ideas as to how we could improve one of our algorithms. Just that exposure created an innovation. Another tip is to really get out of the office. You know how sometimes you get your best ideas when you're in the shower? Well, sometimes your best ideas are actually when you're out of the office, not in a boardroom or sitting at your desk. So encourage employees and yourself to attend meetups, conferences, go out and see clients, talk with as many people as possible. And you don't necessarily have to talk about your problem or innovation. Just listen. What are their problems? What are their challenges? When we started building out our platform, we started talking to a variety of different personas, different clients. And we didn't ask them any questions about their problems. We just asked them what were their goals for the year, where did they want to see themselves, and how we could maybe help achieve those goals. Another thing you can be doing is changing your seating arrangement. Now, we're lucky enough to be in an open concept office, which makes it a little bit easier to move desks around. But if this isn't the case in your organization, you might want to consider swapping desks maybe for a day. And the reason I'm suggesting this is when you're sitting somewhere else, just a new environment or sitting next to somebody new and hearing their conversation will help you come up with ideas, put you in a different mindset and a different setting. Another tip is to have lunch with someone new. If you're always having lunch with the same people or alone, consider going and lunching with someone completely different. We actually had an initiative within our company where we paired people up randomly, and they had to go out for lunch, fill out a form about 3 things that they learned about that person. Now, our intention with this wasn't necessarily to come up with new innovative ideas. The goal here was for people to feel more comfortable with each other. And when people feel comfortable, and we've told them that we're open to new ideas and innovations, it makes it that much easier to come forward with them. Another things is to write on the wall, redecorate. We recently renovated our office, and we made sure that almost 90% of the wall space was space where you can actually write. And the reason for this is whenever you're writing and it's a visual element, and even the act of writing something sparks, makes a trigger within your brain. And we see that it makes it a lot easier for us to come up with new ideas when we're working this way. If you can't, make all the walls whiteboards, even adding a piece of artwork in a space makes people think. It'll make you stop and look at it, and it's kind of gets the wheels turning and will help with the innovative process. So once you've shaken things up and you've got ideas coming, you got to be able to catch and select those ideas. So how are you going to catch them? You can catch them in person, of course, by telling people you're open to listening to their idea, creating an inbox where everyone can email their ideas. If you've got an intranet, come up with a forum where people can share things. Have a post-it board in the kitchen where people can just anonymously post an idea for a change. I even read of a company that created a Pinterest board. So people were able to pin their ideas onto this board if they were a little bit more visual. Now, once you've caught these ideas, the critical part will be selecting them, right? You'll have maybe 100 ideas. You have to come up with a way for scoring and rating these ideas. And it's also important to figure out who will review these ideas and what metrics you might use to rate the ideas and the innovations that come in. I'll be honest, we haven't always been the best at this selection process, putting something a little bit more formal. But a friend of mine actually shared with me a scorecard that could be used for scoring and rating ideas, which I've put here, and I put the link to the scorecard as well. So after this presentation, when this is shared, you can take a look at it and see if it's something that would be of interest to you. So you've caught and select the ideas. It's important to validate and test these ideas. Just because you've selected an idea doesn't mean it's the best idea, the best innovation, and that it's going to work. You'll have to do some validating and testing to make sure it's worth a real investment of your time and money. So at this stage as well, you have to be ready for failure and restarting the entire process. When we started our idea of creating a platform, we drew out some concepts and created a quick little video so that we can share with people and get their insights. Sometimes they liked what we had to say, other times they completely disagreed. What's important here is whenever you're validating it, that you get at least at the minimum 10, 15 people to test it out. Depending on what your industry is, if you're able to create a prototype, maybe you create a fake landing page on a website and see what the reaction is, a collage of screenshots, whatever it is. If you're able to create like a visual aspect to your idea and share it with employees, customers, vendors to validate and do a test, that'll help you make the right choice with which innovation you'll move forward with. It's not a guaranteed foolproof method. Of course, there's the possibility that even after you've validated and tested, it's not the right way forward. You just have to be ready for that and try again, right? Thomas Edison had a quote, and he said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work, right? So just keep restarting until you find a way that does work. Lastly, the fifth point here is that you have to make this the norm. What I'm suggesting here today is not a one-time process or a weekend team building activity that you'll do, collect ideas, and call it a day. It needs to become the norm in your organization. It's a continuous process for your long-term growth. So the first thing is to make this the norm is you need to make sure that within your organization, it's clear as to your North Star, your why, your purpose. What is it that you're trying to achieve? What value will you bring to your customers with this innovation? To really hear that the idea is to make sure you're not just innovating for the sake of innovating. It takes a village for an established company to continuously innovate. It's particularly difficult since you're already running your day-to-day activities. That's why you need your entire team, from your executives to your frontline employees. Remember, it's not a one-person role. You can't hire someone for innovation and expect that person to just be continuously innovating. And you also can't buy innovation, so it's really a collective process. And your colleagues might actually have the answers. The last point here is to really make time for it. And this one's a real challenge, right? When we started working on our platform, we already had a business. Our time was fully allocated. And so we started small. We said we would meet for an hour every 2 weeks to chat about what we had discovered, to keep the idea moving forward. And really start wherever you are. Start wherever you can, whether it's chatting about it at lunch with a group of people who are interested in innovating, or making it formal and allocating a time slot. If you don't plan for it, then it makes it that much more difficult to create a culture of innovation, because that's really what you want to get to in the end. Now, the last point here is innovation has no title. What I mean by this is it's not up to the founder, the CEO, the owner of your company to come up with innovations. Everyone within the company can be innovative. Think of all the great companies and how they continuously have been innovating. It's not the idea of one person. It's definitely not just Matt Zuckerberg at Facebook who's coming up with the latest innovations. It's everyone within the organization that's doing that. And now that concludes my part about innovation. I do want to talk a little bit about Encore Travel. As Andrea mentioned, we've been around since 1987 and proudly women-owned by Monique Mardinian, who dreamed of a travel agency which will provide companies insight and control over their corporate travel spend. We have 70 employees based in Montreal, Canada, and we are now the only fully Canadian and female-owned travel management company left. We're responsible for several innovations over the years, and most recently, Encore Travel invested in the development of a corporate travel and communications platform, which we call Z, and that's the team that I oversee. I would be happy to chat with anybody here today who has implemented some solutions, who has questions or insights. Please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat and brainstorm with people. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm not an expert. I'm just trying to figure things out just like you, and maybe we can figure them out together. So I hope this webinar was insightful and helpful, and I hope to be able to chat with you soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cinzia. I would remind everybody that this is the moment, the most important moment of the webinar is the time to make questions. So if you have questions, please write them down in the Q&A or chat boxes, and I'll make sure to read them out loud so that Cynthia can respond to them. I have one very interesting question. So,
Sure.
innovation requires dedicated time and effort. This is costly and might or will slow down the delivery roadmap. Innovation, therefore, needs to be adopted throughout the organization, including leadership. The question is, how can we get leadership to accept a slower pace of, for example, software delivery in order to support innovation? Will they accept less releases within the quarter? How do you recommend this to be handled?
I think you really need to look at it from a long-term play, right? What we're talking about here is short-term. There might be some small sacrifices that need to be made to have the time to innovate. And your innovation is really for your long-term growth and success. So it's a question of time management. Like I shared, we started with 1 hour every 2 weeks. We got to figure out what is that time slot that people can dedicate so that you're able to fit it into your day to day. That's the only way to make it happen. You've got to find the time for it.
And in terms of kind of like convincing the leadership, like what if perhaps innovation is not necessarily happening in the minds of the leaders, but more like maybe middle management level? How can you, if you are a middle manager, how can you really try to convince and do something to ignite innovation?
You have to have that discussion with your leadership. Share some use cases of what's happening in the market and the competition. We're in an interesting period of time where we see a lot of companies who are shutting down because they haven't innovated, right? I think just yesterday there was an announcement that Carlton Cards was going to be shutting down a lot of its retail stores, and comments were made that those stores had not changed in 20 years. So I think it's bringing forward what's happening in the market and what needs to be done to survive. And depending on your leadership and what interests them the most. Obviously, if you have an idea of an ROI or a dollar figure that can be brought forward to the company, if you were to spend time on it, that helps to build your case.
Thank you. And I think that is very tied with a comment that one participant left here, Andre Howdy. I am an executive innovation. I'm an executive. Innovation stems from a need. Generally, this is something that will improve whatever is key to the company. Improve EBITDA, EBIT, free cash flow, or other. It is important to tie the need to innovate to the corporate goals. Otherwise, leaders might see it as a flat cost without clear gains. Thank you, Andre. That is, I think, very relevant comment for what you just explained, Cynthia. And in terms of managing the team, I don't know if you have any comment about that.
No, I mean, completely agree, right? It's what I was mentioning, a need, a problem. If you're going to spend time innovating on something that's not solving a problem, it's risky. So not saying you can't do that, but you really have to time box it and restrain the investment on it. If you're innovating to solve a need and a problem of your clients and of your industry, then that'll make much more financial sense, and of course has to positively impact your EBITDA at the end of the day.
Thank you. Michelle here is asking, you mentioned earlier the need to rate or prioritize innovative ideas. How do how do you rate and prioritize ideas today?
I think to rate the ideas, you have to go back to your main goal and your main purpose. What are you trying to achieve? If you think of, let's say, you know, Airbnb, their mission is to have people experience unique stays and activities to be like a local, right? So whatever innovation that you're going to be working on, does it relay back to that main goal? If it does, and it also makes financial sense, then that's how you prioritize them. If it doesn't, then you kind of work your way down. You also have to look at what the scope of it is, how large of it is it, a small innovation, or is this really something that would require extensive amount of work and effort to develop it, and just creating like a bit of a grid, a scale, an ABC, a 1, 2, 3, and rating what those innovations would look like and which ones would make most sense.
Awesome. And you were also mentioning and talking a lot about like the culture of innovation inside the organization. How and of course it's not something that you can create in a day, but how do you deal with a maybe members of the team that are really reluctant to change? I know that you gave some examples of like little practices that you could implement so that people kind of like start getting uncomfortable in a way, and in that sense, open themselves to new ideas. But in the case of like dealing with people that are not very maybe used to change or are very reluctant to change, what would you suggest as a manager um, to deal with these people?
I think you have to, in those cases, kind of go down to the root cause as to why are they reluctant to change, right? Sometimes it comes from an insecurity. Maybe they don't want to change because they think that their roles will be affected if there is a change and an innovation that's brought forward. Um, and so you need to understand where is this stemming from and to help them see the big picture. If a company continues to innovate, then the company is growing and in the end will mean more job security. So I think you really need to understand where the reluctance is coming from, and just by asking questions, right? Like, what is it that makes you feel uncomfortable about this? And in addition to that, I think it comes down to also when you're hiring new employees, it's important that you ask them about how they feel about change and innovation and how they feel about new ideas, because it's a twofold part. It's really who you're bringing into your organization and then addressing the people within the your current employees.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I will give one last chance to all the attendees to make their questions. If there's anything that wasn't clear, oh yes, I got one. Um, Innovation can and must happen anywhere in the organization: finance, HR, executives, QA, R&D. In R&D, this means spending time experimenting with new technologies, which often will not result in a direct product improvement. Yes, we learn from this, but corporation needs to be ready to accept this loss leader effort. Do you agree?
100% agree. It's not like, as I mentioned, even if you validate and test an idea, it's not a guarantee that it's going to be a success. And I mean, some of the big players launch ideas and they don't work out. So you have to be ready for failure. And I think when you're presenting that to your leadership, you also have to prepare them for the fact that you're going to do everything that you need to do, but it's possible that it might not work out. And the key at that point is to be able to fail fast, move on, and restart the process.
Great. And thinking a little bit more about like perhaps smaller companies or startups. Sometimes, as some people mentioned, there's this perception that innovation can be costly, and they don't really know how to start if it's investment or experimenting with new technologies. How do you recommend a small company to try to like put in place some of these practices without losing focus or kind of like preventing or overcoming all these challenges that you face when you're trying to grow if you were a very small company?
Yeah, I mean, you got to start with wherever you are, right? You don't have to focus on trying to create the next Tesla. Um, what is that one pain point that you have, and coming up with a solution, and then just building from there. You've got to start somewhere, and whether that pain point is something as simple as putting in a little process in place, all the way to creating a completely new product. You need to just try it out. And an existing company actually has a greater advantage compared to a startup, is that an existing company has the customer base, and it's much easier for you to validate things and talk to your clients. You have this group of people that you can go to, whereas a startup, they might be innovating and creating a product, a process, whatever have you, but it becomes much more challenging for them to validate the idea. So existing companies are actually sometimes in a better position to innovate and to be able to move forward with it. And that's really what we saw, where process innovation was one of the greatest categories of innovations in the last couple of years. And primarily that comes from existing companies. We just don't have, it's just not as hyped up as maybe the startups might be.
Got it. Okay, I think these have been amazing questions. Thank you, everybody. I would like to remind everybody that this webinar has been recorded, so you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. So if you maybe joined later, or you want to listen a little bit more in depth about any topic or thing that Cinzia share with us today, you can do it with the recording. So I don't know, Cinzia, if you have any, last comments, and everybody as well, if you have any last minute questions, this is the last minutes to do them. Cinzia, do you have any last comments? Sorry.
No, this was just want to say it was a fantastic experience. Also, great exercise of putting your ideas down on paper, so to speak. And to anybody out in the audience, feel free to reach out. Would love to chat with you if you're going through this, or if you've got some ideas. It would be a pleasure.
Awesome. I would encourage also all the talent out there that might be listening. If you are interested in running a webinar, you can apply on our website. So don't miss that opportunity. Thank you, Cinzia. This was very interesting. I think all the information was really very relevant for everybody who's in the process of growing, trying to put out their ideas. And thank you so much, because I think you do a tremendous job with the company and all your team. So congratulations for that, and thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge with us today.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. This webinar has been recorded, and don't hesitate to follow up with Cinzia if you have any follow-up questions or would just like to connect. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.